New Orleans, Louisiana. A city very rich in culture, famous for its music and Creole cuisine. New Orleans is said to be the birthplace of jazz. It's referred to as the Big Easy because of the easygoing nature of the locals and the prevailing party atmosphere of the city. On January 7, 1973, Mark Essex, who was not from New Orleans, and obviously did not have the easygoing mentality of the normal townsfolk, would storm the downtown Howard Johnson's hotel, setting it on fire, and raining terror on the first responders from an upper floor with his .44 caliber semi-automatic Ruger carbine rifle. And then there was Marine Lieutenant Colonel Charles H. Pitman. Pitman had been appointed commander of the Marine Air Reserve Training Detachment in Belle Chasse, Louisiana, after being wounded during his third tour in Vietnam. Having flown everything from the EF-10 and RF-8 jets in recon missions, and the Cobra, Huey, CH-46, and the CH-53 helicopters in combat, Lieutenant Colonel Pitman was a true badass. He had been shot down 7 times in combat, and while flying the CH-53 in Laos, he was hit by an armor-piercing round and his leg was shattered. Still trying to rehabilitate his leg, Pitman had been running while Essex's siege was starting. He didn't learn about the unfolding situation until he got back to the base and saw the news on the television. The terror began that day at about 10:15 a.m. when Essex shot a local grocery owner and then stole a 1968 Chevelle and drove to the downtown Howard Johnson's hotel. He chose this location because it is right across the street from the New Orleans City Hall and the Orleans Parish Courthouse. He climbed the fire escape trying to find a way in, but all doors were locked until he reached the top 18th floor where he found a door that had been propped open with a bundle of linen. Inside, he encountered 3 African-American employees, to whom he informed, "Don't worry sister, we're only shooting whites today." These women then ran to notify the authorities. He then encountered a newlywed couple, 28-year-old Dr. Robert Stegall and his wife Elizabeth. When Dr. Stegall saw Essex with the rifle, he shouted, "What are you doing?" and tried to get the rifle away from him. During the struggle, Stegall was shot in the arm and then fell to the floor. Essex then shot him in the chest, killing him. 25-year-old Elizabeth ran to her slain husband and Essex shot her in the head, killing her instantly. He dragged the murdered couple into their hotel room and proceeded to soak telephone books in lighter fluid and lit them on fire to start the blaze that would draw first responders. Before exiting the room, he left the Pan-African flag by the bodies of the newlyweds. As Essex continued to light more fires, the hotel's assistant manager, 62-year-old Frank Schneider, had ascended to the 11th floor to investigate the reports of a man armed with a rifle. Essex fatally shot him in the back of the head. He then descended to the 10th floor to set more fires. There, he shot and fatally wounded the hotel's general manager, Walter Collins, who was trying to alert hotel guests about the fire. Firefighter, Timothy Urson, was shot through the shoulder by Essex while he was trying to climb a ladder to rescue hotel guests. He would lose his arm from that wound. As paramedics loaded Urson into the ambulance driver was wounded with a shot in the back. Officer David McCann carried Officer Kenneth Solis beneath the cover of trees after he was shot while trying to dispel a crowd of onlookers. Another officer, Emmanuel Palmazano, was shot in the arm and back while running to their aid. Patrolman Philip Coleman drove his patrol car onto the plaza so that he could bring the wounded officers to the hospital. He was fatally shot in the head as he was trying to help the wounded men into the car. Essex would also kill traffic officer Paul Persigo and Deputy Superintendent Louis Sergo. Mark Essex's attacks on police actually started 1 week earlier, on New Year's Eve, when he ambushed, shot, and killed 19-year-old cadet Alfred Harrell. Essex was a black supremacist who, in his own words, said he intended to kill just honkies. It's ironic that the first person he would kill was a young black man. He would also fatally wound Officer Edwin Hosley Sr. that night and avoid capture. Let's get back to the main hero of our story, Lieutenant Colonel Chuck Pitman. When Pitman learned of the crisis that was unfolding, He sent 2 of his best marksmen to go with the Coast Guard helicopter to offer protection as they rescued people from the burning building. But the Coast Guard chopper ended up not being able to make the flight. Listen to Lieutenant General Chuck Pitman tell the story himself in this interview by Generations Broadcasting.
It was too bad to fly normal flights. The weather was below minimums and so forth. So I'm sitting there waiting for the Coast Guard to show up, and they don't show up. And after about an hour and a half, the 2 marksmen came back. I said, "Where are you? What have you been doing? What's going on?" He said, "The Coast Guard's not going to go. The weather's too bad."
The weather was too dangerous for the Coast Guard, so Chuck decided he would fly the mission himself. He had a reserve squadron at the base because it was their drill weekend and they wanted to help too, so he sent them to go and donate blood because of the amount of people being shot. He assembled a crew consisting of his co-pilot and 3 Marines with M14s. Chuck instructed the crew to remove the windows from the CH-46C Knight so that they would not become shrapnel if struck by gunfire. This would also provide better access to fire upon Essex. When Chuck called the police department offering his assistance, they said yes, and if he has a searchlight on the helicopter it would be very helpful as it was starting to get dark.
Well, I lived on the river, right along the river, along the levee actually. So I knew the river pretty well, and that's the best way to town from this base. So all I had to do was make it a few blocks to the river. I have an airplane that will float in the river for a short period of time. We flew up the river, and as we went up, we were going by ships that were anchored in the river, and they were looking down at us as we went by. And we got to the Mississippi River Bridge, and we pulled up. I could see the lights in the haze and the fog overhead, so we pulled up there, and took the interstate right off the bridge, second right, and a couple of different blocks, and we were down at City Hall. City Hall had a parking lot across the street, which is now a Super Bowl parking lot. So we landed there behind City Hall, but the gunfire was going overhead, and our people were shooting, and somebody was shooting back on occasion. So it was just really quite a mess.
Chuck met with the police at the command center, which was on the bottom floor of the hotel. 3 policemen with automatic weapons joined his crew on the helicopter. They began making passes over the roof of the hotel and firing shots at where they believed Essex was hiding. He was hiding in a concrete cubicle on the roof and would shimmy up a drain pipe inside of it so he couldn't be seen through the opening. As the helicopter would complete each pass over the rooftop, Essex would run out and take shots at the helicopter from behind. This would continue on into the night. Each time the helicopter would get to the rooftop, Pitman would have to adjust the searchlight in the dark to shine it on Essex's hiding spot. On one of these occasions, Essex ran out and took shots at the front of the helicopter before he could be seen with the searchlight. Pitman rushed the helicopter down towards him, and one of the policemen on the helicopter shot at Essex, then everyone else including police snipers on surrounding rooftops opened fire. His body had to be picked up off of the roof with a scooper. The autopsy report stated Essex had been shot over 200 times. As for the good guy in our story, despite his courageous actions, his impeccable display of leadership skills and his decidedly stoic call to duty, the Marines still wanted to court-martial Lieutenant Colonel Pitman for using a military helicopter for a civilian tactical operation. It wasn't until Edward Hebert, a Louisiana native and head of the Armed Services Committee, got wind of the plans for court-martial and called the Secretary of Defense Melvin Laird and said, "That's my boy." Then instead of a court-martial, Pitman received a Leadership Award and an Air Medal. Chuck Pitman retired as a lieutenant general in 1990 with over 12,000 flight hours. Not only was he a pioneering helicopter pilot, but he had decades of experience flying fixed-wing aircraft as well. He had logged 575 arrested carrier landings. Throughout his decorated career, he would serve in several different aviation-related staff and command positions. He had received the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, Purple Heart, 65 Air Medals and 4 Distinguished Flying Crosses. General Pitman left this world on February 13, 2020, leaving a wake of legendary heroic actions. May he never be forgotten. This video is not just to honor Lieutenant General Charles Pitman, but to honor all those that were killed, wounded, or put themselves in harm's way that day to try and stop this evil person with a terrifying agenda. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.